Hello there, friendos. It's your old pal Chad Dukes, and this is my producer, Gigantor. If you're liking what you're seeing here on the Chad Dukes Show YouTube channel, well, we sure would love it if you'd click like on this video, then maybe hit subscribe. Hit that little bell thing. Isn't that what you do? You hit the bell, and then we spam your phone. We sure would appreciate it. And if you don't want to do that, well, then don't. Those seem to be the options. Take care.
This is Radiofile with Chad Dukes.
Welcome to another episode of Radiofile. I am your host, Chad Dukes, Big Shooter. On this week's episode of Radiofile, I am joined by Sam Roberts, who, of course, is the host of the Jim and Sam Show. Our very first episode had his host, co-host, Jim Norton, who I've been a fan of for many years. So they do the morning show on what used to be the old Opie and Anthony station. Now it's 103 with a bunch of other shows. And he also does a bunch of stuff for the WWE. But one of the things about Sam is that he kind of came up the same way I did in radio, where you intern for a radio station that you ultimately are a host on. And it's a weird thing because it takes a really long time for people to stop looking at you like you're an intern, to try to, kind of acknowledge the fact that you have progressed and advanced. And, it happened for me. Clearly it happened for him, but he just interviewed the Undertaker, too. I want to talk to him about that. That is a rather elusive guest to have on. But talking about doing mornings, what it's like trying to do radio. I'm a big fan of Sirius. I just think that that's where, you could still go and do talk radio the way that it is supposed to be. It doesn't really exist any longer on terrestrial radio, unfortunately. I love doing my show. I like our station, but look, man, it's sports talk. What else? Political talk. That's it, right? Cornball morning shows. Horrible cornball, wacky morning zoos. That's it. That's all we got. And podcasts aren't radio shows. I'm sorry. Until they're happening live and you can take phone calls, but you know what that is? It's radio. Something that's kind of happening live and has energy. And you've heard me say this stuff before. That's what I'm looking for, and Sirius still has that. So very excited to be joined by my next guest. Of course, you can listen to him mornings on Sirius XM 103 with Mr. Jim Norton, and, of course, the Not Sam Wrestling podcast, available wherever you find fine podcasts. Mr. Sam Roberts is with me on the Mattress Warehouse hotline as we live and breathe. Sam, great to catch up with you, buddy. How are you?
Good, man. Thanks for having me.
Well, first of all, congratulations. Landing an interview with The Undertaker is a really big deal. And I know that, much like myself, you've been watching that guy your whole life and working for the WWE. I'm sure some of the, newness of it wears off. But that is an elusive one-on-one, my friend. Congratulations on that.
Man, yeah, that was one where, I had to take some time afterwards to process. This really just happened. This is one of those. It was one of those things that at first you're like, well, before I retire, I want to do this. And then you kind of get to the point where you're okay with the fact that it's not going to happen. You just go, you know what? I'm probably never going to get to do that. And it's fine. It's cool. It'd be nice, but I don't think so.
Yeah.
And then when it finally does, you're like, wow. And he was great. It's, one of those never meet your heroes things, and they turn out to actually be excellent. It was amazing.
It's fun listening to him talk. He was just so protected for so long. I remember here locally, Don and Mike, I'm sure you remember them. They had an interview with The Undertaker 25 years ago. But he kept up the kayfabe the whole time, and now you see him pop up with Stone Cold. You see him pop up. It's really wild because you could never kayfabe a character the way that they did with him for so long, with how much access we have to these guys and gals now. So that's what makes it even that much more special.
I couldn't believe how open he was. That was my only thing was, even though he's doing interviews now and even though he's got the documentary and everything, is he really going to want to talk about everything? And how far into detail is he going to go, and how comfortable is he going to be? And I couldn't believe that kind of whatever I was throwing at him, he would just answer as a human being and wasn't protective at all. And we just, oh, yeah, well, here's what happened with that. It's like, wow.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a unique experience. All right, I have so much I need to ask you. Well, first of all, the Jim and Sam, it's a radio show that you're doing right now, and it's very difficult. I do a radio show every day, and it's not on the level of, reaching the audience you guys do, but how much more difficult has your job become, not only with COVID, but also with all of the tension where you say one wrong word, you're going to have thousands and thousands of people immediately calling for your job. You guys do kind of a funny, provocative, edgy show. I don't really have to do that in sports talk. How much more difficult has that become?
It's not so bad being on Sirius. Like, people, unless it gets really bad, tend to kind of leave Sirius alone. And I think Jim and I have also just been through so much because, we've got that same history. We kind of know where the line is, and we kind of know what it feels like when, that shouldn't happen. That's going to be bad. But, when you've lived through it and it becomes a familiar thing, it kind of becomes easier to protect yourself from it a little bit and kind of know where that line is. I mean, you're still, and I'm sure you have the same thing, you still always have that feeling of, I don't 100% know everything that I said today. And is something going to did I say something bad, or is it going to be put in a bad context, or, that's always kind of lingering in the back of your head. But, you have to try harder, I think, than ever to just make sure that the things that you say, you can stand by and you can justify, and get to, I guess, to do that for 3 hours a day, every day. It's not normal behavior. Yeah. And then, being at home, it's been okay. Thank God that Zoom and Skype and all that exists, so we can still see each other, and we can still bounce off of each other and stuff like that, because it would probably be a lot more difficult if we were just relying on just the audio. Yeah. We've been doing it from home and kind of have gotten used to just seeing each other on the monitors for the last 3 months.
I got to be honest. I've been doing my show. They sent me home. I've been begging to go back because there's nobody in the building, but they won't let me. I think my shows are way worse. Like, I just don't think they're as good. And I wouldn't have expected that, because I'm like, hey, you're comfortable. There's no commute. You're not going to be frustrated. But there's just something about physically being in the building, doing radio with people and being around your producers and, being around everybody that's kind of involved with that. And then I don't know. I know you guys do the same thing, but I draw topics and stuff to talk about by just existing with other radio people in the building. I really do feel like the shows aren't of the same quality, at least for me personally.
Yeah, it's interesting. Like, it's definitely extremely different. Because there is that thing. Like, I like being at home, but I also built a studio in the house that I'm in. So it still feels like, I'm not in my closet or in the corner of a room or something and feeling like I'm in my house and kind of relaxing, because I think I get the same view if that were the case. But luckily I built this studio in my house before, so I've been doing everything out of my studio. So there is still, I think, having that there's just something psychologically. When I walk downstairs, I'm at work. When I go back upstairs, I'm not at work anymore. So I still have that feeling of I'm at work because I went downstairs. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I get that. I'm in my kitchen. Maybe that's the biggest issue here, is I'm staring at my refrigerator. Talk to me about. I've been a fan of Jimmy. They did down here in D.C. The way that we got introduced to Opie and Anthony was they started putting their worst ofs on the weekend. I mean, this was before they were on here full time, and Jimmy was on the show at that point. I was a huge fan of his comedy. I'd never heard anybody that was as self-deprecating as he was at that time. You started on the show at a very low capacity, worked yourself up all the way to now you're co-hosting with the guy. I've co-hosted with a lot of different people and from a lot of different walks of life, but that's an enormous amount of history. And then what I found is I interned for this radio station, and for a long time there are people that still just viewed me that way. How long did that process take for you to go to, hey, I'm sitting here, I'm getting coffee for Opie and Anthony, now I'm the lead producer, and now I'm, the host, and I'm hosting mornings and anchoring it with this guy that's known me throughout this whole process. Did that provide any chemistry issues, or did it kind of help with you guys becoming, a formidable duo?
No, I mean, I think that's such a good point that I don't think people really can grasp, like that story of starting as an intern and being at the bottom. And you do have to, even after you've gotten to a spot, you really have to prove yourself more, because people around you will still people will see you the way they were introduced to you, and that's just how they see you. It's never been an issue with Jim. I think leaving the show for a period of time and doing my own thing and then coming back to work with Jim was a big thing. Jim and I also had a bunch of conversations before we started, and I kind of told him straight up, like, I love doing radio with you, and I would love to do a show with you. Like, I just need to know that that I need to be a co-host, not like a sidekick or a just a guy to set you up. I was like, if you want to do the Jim Norton show and bring in a producer that's kind of on the air with you, that's totally cool. I don't want to do that, but I would do the show if you wanted to have me on, and I would help you find somebody to do it with you. And he was like, no, I like doing stuff with you, and I think that we could do stuff together. So we had that conversation. I think there are other people that even to this day, like, I think there are still people at Sirius and higher ups and things like that I'm still kind of working on breaking that I don't know if it's a stereotype, but breaking that image of me as an intern or a producer or however they see me, and not a on-air guy, a host.
Yeah. And it's good that Sirius is so important, in my opinion. It's talk radio, and podcasts are fine. I do a bunch of podcasts. I know you do a bunch of podcasts, and I like it. I get to hear from people that are hosting podcasts that I probably would never get to hear host a show. But it's not radio, and it's not happening live, and there aren't phones, and people aren't driving around listening to it live in their cars. And that's why, I think that where you're doing your show from now is it. It's the final frontier. And I always, I subscribe. I got a couple subscriptions. I always pull for that because I want it to still exist. It's gone from where I am. It's either political talk or sports talk or bad music, and that's it. Now, I always feel very grateful that your guys' station exists, and Howard's show is very different, but just that kind of format is still there, and it seems to be the only place it lives right now.
Yeah, I grew up on the same stuff that you grew up on. I grew up a fan of Opie and Anthony and Howard and that form of talk radio. When I went to school and was doing college radio, that's kind of it was in my head, not, realizing that you and I would be the last generation that grew up with any of it, that it would kind of, the entire industry would just fall apart under our feet.
Yeah.
I think I love Sirius. I think Sirius is that middle ground between radio and podcasting, where I think a lot of younger people are not listening to the radio anymore. They're all kind of getting their audio entertainment from podcasting. But I think there is still that kind of radio magic where it's on every day. It's on when you're driving. It's live. It's phones. It's topical, top of mind stuff that is not meant to be evergreen necessarily, but just meant to be like, okay, this is happening right now because you're in the car and I'm with you, and here's what we're talking about because here's what you're talking about. I think that Sirius lets us do that in a way that sounds a little bit more like podcasts, in the sense that we don't have to break every 15 minutes. We don't have to hit the, fun on the fives or whatever, any of the old like radio stuff that just sounds so dated now. We're allowed to kind of sit there for an hour and a half if we want to, and just talk about whatever, and talk to a guest about whatever, and make it sound like it's a little more of the time, but still have that radio thing to it.
Yeah, it's important, man. All right, yeah. I got to ask, the show, the Opie Anthony show that you kind of came up with, I think one of the reasons why I loved it so much, it was so toxic that I couldn't believe it existed at times. And I know that's been to the detriment of some of the hosts. Certainly you've fostered legions of weirdos that now are very creepy online. But do you think maybe one of the reasons why you were able to persevere and kind of find yourself in this spot where, a lot of irons in the fire and very successful is to come through like a fiery crucible, like what that show was, where every day it just feels like a running gun battle at times. And it's not just, us against management. It's everybody. Look, I just remember when anyone would show up late, there's people just getting carved apart. How much do you think that helped kind of form the type of broadcaster you ultimately became? I
think it helped a lot especially because, I was in a position where, to stop myself from getting thrown under the bus, I was throwing as many people under the bus as I could. But that also meant that I had to be perfect, because everybody was waiting for me to screw up, because everybody wanted to get me back for whatever I had put them under the bus for, which meant that, I couldn't make excuses. I just had to do the work and just had to, whatever was necessary. I had to be there. It had to be right. It had to be on time. It had to be what was asked for. And that's definitely, that's an attitude that my parents raised me with, for sure. But I mean, being under the microscope like that and being under the gun, where it's like, if you don't, you're going to get embarrassed. You're going to get carved up. It's going to be ugly. Then it's like, okay, how do I avoid this? Get it done. Like, don't give them any reason. And even when you don't give them any reason, you're going to get it. But if you can, and that's what it is, you try to avoid it as much as possible. And now that's definitely bled over. It's still in the back of my head. Like, when I'm doing something, would I be able to present this in that room? That room doesn't exist anymore, but would I be able to present this in that room and stand by it? And, and that whole not having excuses thing, like, is this my fault? Is the reason this isn't working my fault? Because, in those days, if it was your fault, you were getting called out for it. There was no sort of, but I tried my best. I thought it would be better. Like, that wasn't really an option.
Yeah. I think my favorite period of any type of radio ever was when Fez Watley was having his mental breakdown, and it felt like almost on a daily basis you were pulling clips and bringing them in to Opie and Anthony. I believe Bennington called it doing a Ron and Fez Sports Center. And it didn't matter what happened, you were getting blamed for everything. It didn't matter if Opie said something or Anthony or got brought up organically. What was that like? Because I tried to explain it to people that aren't initiated, that didn't listen to it. And like, was it a bit? Was it a work? I'm like, no, I can't. It was the most unique radio I've ever heard, because there was so much mental illness involved. When that was happening and he was like that and you're getting blamed for everything, what was that like?
I mean, it really was that. It's just, luckily I grew up with wrestling, so that sort of line between work and shoot is never really concrete. Like, you're always just kind of like, I don't know if this is real or fake. It just is. Like, this is just what we're doing now. And so, I always had a show first mentality, almost like a sociopathic show first mentality. So, like, it didn't bother me if anybody was going to blame me for anything, as long as we could sit there in the morning and laugh for 20 minutes at this thing. That's my job, like that, and you just have to get it done. So, I mean, I never really got bothered, maybe in the very beginning, but I kind of got over it quickly. I never really got bothered by getting blamed for stuff, or, if somebody went on the air and said something was my fault that it wasn't. Like, I didn't take it upon myself to correct anybody. I was like, okay, well, if you think that's my fault, it's my fault. What am I going to do? Let's move on to the next thing. Because by then I'm already pulling the clip for the next day anyway. So,
sure.
So, I that was my, and I guess at the time, I don't know half the stuff I did back then, just because it was just trying to please the beast, just trying to deliver what it was that I thought was desired from me for O&A. And that was the kind of beginning, middle, end of everything.
Yeah. I had E-Rock on the show, and I'll try not to mark out over the old radio stuff, but one instance I wanted to get your take on was the Steve C. and the Mondays conspiracy is the best bit of work around. And the way that kind of played out over weeks, where he's for the foreseeable future and so forth and so on, and taking all those on, the animosity was so palpable in those moments. And I loved Steve on the show, and I loved when you guys would get on his case, and God rest his soul, I wish he was still around. But when that was happening, it just sounded like the most fun radio ever, where the executive producer is just getting carved apart and is caught dead to rights, but still won't stop punching back. Was that as much fun to be a part of as it is to listen to?
I mean, it really was, especially because, like, I loved Steve.
He's the best.
Like loved him. And and it wouldn't be like, it would get the animosity. I mean, for me anyway, existed. Steve was actually the one that told me, like, when I was really young, like when I was probably just coming off of my internship, and I was just a little maniac, just an asshole. And he was like, you can't act like this. He was like, unless it's for the air, you can't just run around causing chaos. And I was like, but if it's for the air, and he was like, yeah, if it's for the air, of course. And I was like, okay. And that's when everything started coming up on the air, because I was like, all right, but I can cause chaos if it means I can bring it on the air. So that's what I would do with Steve. And Steve knew, Steve, like, as much as he hated being in the barrel and it would be frustrating for him and everything, like, he was in the same boat as I was describing. He was such a content first guy that he knew inherently, he didn't do things for negative attention, but he knew when he was caught, and he knew when he was in the barrel, and it was like, yeah, he didn't try to worm out of it. You know what I mean? Sure. He was like, yeah, they got me. But the Mondays thing was so great, because it's like he comes to you and he's like, yeah, we have this weird vacation day setup where we got to use like these crazy amounts of vacation days that we never used. And like, I never used any of mine, because I was like, there's going to be nothing relaxing about taking all these vacation days. There's no benefit to it. But when he was like, I'm going to take every Monday off, we were all like, okay. And it was one of those, let's just wait. Like, there's nobody ran and ratted, and nobody, it was like, they're going to realize he's out every Monday. Let's just wait. Let's just wait and let a couple Mondays build up, and where's Steve? And then when it finally did hit, it was perfect. It's like, who says for the foreseeable future,
I just remember that, like counting all the Mondays and realizing how many could actually be taken in a row. It was an amazing piece of work. Let me ask you about this. I don't go on Reddit. It's an evil place. I can't believe the way people conduct themselves, but I dabbled on the bulletin boards back, and the fans are so, they can be so evil for that show. And then also, I was a huge wrestling fan my whole life, and I just got tired of dealing with wrestling. They're just so unhappy. They just seem so unhappy with everything. And I think there's so much unhappiness in their personal life, and they apply too much meaning to what they're watching on the TV, and they get too angry at it. How do you navigate the assholes? Because you're dipping from two of the most assholish pools I think maybe exist on the internet. I look, we all build up a thick skin. People say nasty things to us each and every day, but at some point it wears on me. It's got to wear on you. How do you deal with all that?
I mean, it doesn't wear on me at all anymore. It did maybe back in the day, as long as it's not like real life stuff, like, as long as I'm good, my family's good. Like, if it's just people talking on the internet, like, that doesn't bother me at all. Now It's gotten to the point where I'm literally, as far as the wrestling audience goes, I'm literally going on TV and saying things that I know exactly what's going to get you, and and just watching the reaction. And it's, but yeah, I mean, I feel like I've caught so much of that even before Twitter was a thing, like, when it was all just kind of starting. And a lot of that was because on O&A, I would go in and just be the opposite of everything else that was on that show. Like, and it would, obviously they loved the show. So if I was the opposite of everybody, of course you got to hate me. Right. So, but it was one of those things where I had to kind of get used to it and wrap my head around the fact that it wasn't incumbent on me to explain anything to anybody except the guys on the show, or except my bosses at Sirius, or except anything like that. Like, I didn't have to explain to some guy on Twitter that, no, I didn't really mean it like that, or no, we're actually really good friends, or no, like, if what's got you engaged is a seething hatred of me, I'd rather keep you engaged than spoil the hatred,
Yeah, I get it. I just, to me, I'm with you, and just, if you wouldn't be able to do this if you're going to take things personally that people said to you online. But for me, it's so obvious that they're not really, I mean, maybe they don't like you on the show, whatever. Like, it's not the cut of everybody's jib. But the amount of anger and the immediacy of being able to express it online, it's just so obvious to me that they're pissed off at something else and they're just focusing on this instead of addressing whatever that is. That sometimes it's tough to get past. Sometimes I'm like, you can't be this upset with something I said on my goofy sports talk radio show. And I just, for me, that's the difficult part to get past.
You want to get through to them and go like, look, I know it's something else. Let's work it out together. Let's work it out together. I don't have that kind of anger in my life. So let's work on you now. Yeah. And that happens all the time. Or when somebody will like take something literally or whatever it is, and you want to be like, you want to sit them down and kind of pat them on the head and calm them down. It's okay, man. It's okay. But like I said, at the same time, I got enough going on that I don't need to worry about calming anybody else down.
Yeah. One of the things I think you do real well, and it's tough, and I have to do it too. I was sitting with the morning show, and those guys have been doing it for like 25 years, and they're number one rated, and like, picking your spots is so tough when you want to be funny, or like, when you can host a show, and you'll sit down and you're doing shows with Anthony and with Jim in this panel, and I think one of the most difficult things to do is not, you gotta try to engage and you gotta be funny. You can't take a back seat, but you also have to know how to navigate the room. And I've always thought that's something you do a very good job of, because there's people that just come in, like Pablo Francisco comes to mind, and just there's the spotlight's got to be on me, and then there's people that just shrink away from the spotlight like a shrinking violet. You can't do either one of those. It's difficult to be in the middle, but I feel like that's something you've done well for a long time, being around all these legendary radio figures.
Oh, thanks, man. Yeah, I mean, yeah, it's so. I just think it's so important to know what you do well and what you don't do well, and what the person next to you does well, and to let them do that and you just do the thing that you do well. I mean, it definitely took a long time to learn. I think if you go back and listen to me when I was younger, it's like, shut up. But, but also I think that goes back to the original thing where it's like when you're in a room, right, and it's Opie and it's Anthony and it's Norton and it's Patrice and it's Bill Burr. Like, are you really going to pipe up with something that you're not 100% confident in? You know what I mean? Like if you disrupt that flow or you say something that is only okay, you got a room full of 5 of the sharpest people in the history of broadcasting, right, staring a hole in you, ready to be like, okay, we'll talk about you now. And it's like, this isn't what I wanted.
Yeah. I did that, dude. They came down here for the traveling virus, and we were doing evenings, and we were hosting the backstage show, and I'd never met them. And they sat down and were like doing some radio with us, and Voss was there, and Saget was there, and I wanted to make a World of Warcraft joke because Anthony was playing World of Warcraft, but I said wow instead, forgetting that it was Whip 'em Out Wednesday, and everyone they just looked at me like I was a pile of garbage, and then no one spoke to me again for the rest of the day, and it might be the most traumatic thing that's ever happened to me.
Well, it just when you get hit with like such truth, I remember they did a poker tournament, and part of the sponsorship deal was they wanted to make a special out of it, so they just had me take a roving microphone and kind of host a thing, and then they wanted me to build like an hour later. So I would just go from table to table, and it was Opie Anthony and the comics, and everybody was around. And so like I went up to Patrice's table, and I was like, "Oh, Patrice, what about this guy? What's going on with him?" And he looked at me and he goes, "Don't try to use my funny to make up for your lack of funny." I was like, "Oh my, how did you just word that?" I mean, that's exactly what I was.
And of course, that's what I was trying to do, and he immediately called that.
Yeah, like you nailed it and you worded it perfectly, and it took you 10 seconds.
Oh, it's unbelievable. That guy was a hoot. Talk to me about. It's a tough spot for me when I'm talking to all you guys, because I know that this thing with Opie is so odd, and he's always been very good to me, and when he didn't need to. And I remember Anthony screaming, "Who the F is Chad Dukes?" on that show, and Opie had a kind word. I mean, again, you talk about dramatic. He had kind words, and he always has been, generous with me. And then I see that what has happened, and I remember listening to you guys when you first were forming your show, and you were trying to do, look, I wouldn't be here if it's not for this guy, but then all of this is going on the side. How difficult was that, and where is that? Is that relationship exist at all right now?
No, it doesn't. And it sucked, and it still sucks. It's kind of disintegrated like it is, and I still feel that way. I'm going to sit here and ever tell you that guy didn't give me every opportunity early on that I ever got, or that I would never have been on the air had it not been for the opportunities that he gave me, or, just to watch and mentor him. Like, there's stuff that I do today that I know I unconsciously learned from watching Opie navigate a room full of the best comics in the world. Like, I know exactly after I do it. I'm not even conscious of it, but I think about it and I'm going like, yeah, I know exactly where I picked up on that from. And, and we were friends for a long time. So it sucks when stuff like that happens. And I don't really have any negative feelings whatsoever, especially anymore. Maybe, when things are being said and the wounds are fresh, then there was maybe a little bit of back and forth. But I have a tough time having negative feelings towards that guy. I mean, I don't think he can stand me at all, but again, it's just one of those things that I don't have a lot of control over. So what can I do there,
Yeah, I know exactly what you mean. It's just a weird spot to be in, because it's like if you do owe somebody a great debt, and I got a lot of people that I owe great debts in this industry, but like the relationship's fractured that much, it's just unsettling, I imagine, for you. Like, I imagine it's something you would rather not be the way that it is, but the only thing you could do is continue to move forward. Let's talk about that. As far as the way the show is now, and what you guys are doing on a daily basis, it's got to be very rewarding because of the scarcity of it. Is there, I guess what I would ask, is there a next step for you? I mean, if it would me, I would probably look at it and say, well, I've checked just about every box I can possibly do here, knowing what a wrestling fan you are, knowing what a radio fan you are. It feels like that's all there. But is there something else that you're looking to accomplish at this point?
Yeah, I mean, as things go, like, the ambition stays the same. Like, I feel as sort of settled and ambitious as I did when I was 20. The weird thing is that just doesn't go away. I mean, I'm sure you could say the same thing. The fact that you've got your own show in DC. It's a big show. It's been on the air for years now. You are a personality in that market, a big radio personality. And I'm sure if I told you that when you were 20, you'd be like, oh my God, that's everything I could ever want. But if I ask you now, like, so you're done, right? You'd be like, fuck no. Like, no, there's still way more to do. And that's kind of where I'm at. Like, I do try to take as much time out as I can to look around and be like, oh my God, like, I can't believe what has happened over the last 15 years or so. At the same time, it's like I can still see what's out there. Like, I can still see how much more space there is above me to keep going, and that's just kind of the direction that you go in,
Yeah, I completely concur. That's how I look at it as well. Well, there's a lot of success there. It is at Not Sam. Go ahead and follow him on Twitter, notsam.com, and the Jim Norton and Sam Roberts morning show, Sirius XM 103. Check it out on Sirius XM. Know you're busy, buddy. Thanks so much for taking the time. Love talking shop with you. Very jealous of the radio you do every day. It's much deserved. Thank you very much for the time.
Thank you, man. Anytime.
Awesome. Sam Roberts, everybody, on Radiofile with Chad Dukes.